Welcome to the 21st Century Film Club. For the 21st episode, we are reviewing She Said, which was released in 2022. So, what do you think of the film?
I liked the film. I didn't love it. I think part of the problem is, as part of these final few episodes we're doing journalism films. So this film was very influenced by the success of Spotlight, which won Best Picture. So sometimes it felt a bit kind of hackneyed that they were doing this film now and they wanted like an Oscar from it. But I do have to say, I loved the spirit of the film. I loved the female empowerment. I loved the acting, especially the acting from smaller characters like Jennifer Ely, who played one of the victims of Harvey Weinstein, who really started the film in a flashback form as well, which was interesting because I remember when I was first watching, I was like, huh? What's going on? Is this the right film? It was a good opening actually for that. And her acting was phenomenal. It was like those emotionally driven monologues. And I thought the main actresses were brilliant too. I just think sometimes some of the smaller actresses stole the show.
I really enjoyed the film. It was like a really harrowing topic, but the way that they told the story, it was really well done. It was sensitively done. They obviously made efforts to try and not show Harvey Weinstein himself. Like they didn't really give him much attention. Like they mentioned his name a lot, but they gave him a minute of screen time if that. And the attention was more on the people who kind of suffered and the people who suffered abuse. And yeah, the way they portrayed the journalists was like really, really well done. And yeah, it really it made me want to really go into investigative reporting maybe and just go into that world. And yeah, it kind of inspired me, I guess.
Yeah, I found that it was really tastefully done to say it was such a harrowing topic. It could have gone one or two ways the way they decided to go with it. But I thought, as you said, with them not really not having Harvey as obviously was mentioned, but it wasn't the main part of the film. It was more about women coming together and the news team coming together and trying to help all these people and get their voice out there for everyone else. I thought that was the pivotal message that they delivered really well. Yeah,
there wasn't any actual sexual violence shown on screen, and I was reading that was a very conscious decision by the filmmakers. And as you were both saying, it does pay off because we actually see as well the emotional aftermath. I think one of the scenes that really struck me was when a younger version of Verena Chung was crying and she was sobbing in the hallways, and they kept having these great vertical shots of hallways kind of in between and splicing it through. And then instead of showing the violence, they would have audio. And it was almost more, that was probably, I'd say, the best thing and the worst thing about the film was their reliance on audio. It was almost like watching the radio at times. There's so many phone calls. Harvey Weinstein was obviously portrayed by a voice actor, not by himself, on phone call. A lot of the kind of celebrities were on phone call. And to me, it was to be critical here of it as an aesthetic point of view, it's just a bunch of phone calls all put together. But do you guys think that's more realistic at the same time?
Yeah, I don't know if they use the real audio. I think they did in some circumstances, but they use the real audio transcripts and the real clips and stuff like that. And obviously there's some parts they kind of redid and reshot. But yeah, I thought it was a clever use and clever way of doing it, just to portray that story and make it seem real, and bring out the emotion. And yeah, it was really a good way of doing it.
I think in some ways, even just them having the phone calls are just realistic of the life of a journalist. A lot of the time, it will just be a phone call if they can't, say, fly over to wherever to go and meet them. But I did think that with using the voice notes and things, as you said, that was needed. In some ways, it's almost more harrowing hearing it just from an audio. You didn't have to see it what had happened, but you knew, and it was inferring it that hitting home that much that I think it was more powerfully done in some ways.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point because it's also the actor on screen reacting to the phone call. And I think most of the time, especially with kind of Carey Mulligan's character's Megan's depressed state, it was really well done because you could just see it was almost too much for her, and she had kind of reached her upper limit bandwidth, and then it kept kind of coming and coming, all these stories, and she seemed, well, it was more than burnt out. She had postnatal depression, but essentially she was burnt out even before the story begun, because the film started with a previous Me Too story with Donald Trump, who then became president, and that was like the light that ignited the fire with the women's movement in America. But it was, as you said, it's the journalists, even though they can't see it, they're still so depressed. I think that is true for all of us here. When we've ever had to deal with something emotional, you still get it secondhand from the people you're interviewing.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like sometimes like it could be hard to detach from a story, and you could see that it was like consuming them, like they couldn't sleep. There was like phone calls at night. Like it's not something that they could like clock off at like a 9-to-5 job. Like, it just showed how constant and thorough they spent all that time to make sure that they'd done the story right, and even like waiting to make sure they got like they'd given everyone like a right of reply, even if some people might not agree that they should have, but like they needed to. And I think they went about it so well, but it just like portrayed how much goes into like one front page of a story like one day, but like months went into it.
Yeah, it was odd that it was just one front page.
Yeah. I really found that aspect of it really interesting, how like they showed how the job of a reporter is like, it's like 24/7. Like they can't, like they're getting phone calls like at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. And like when they're at birthday parties, or like I spend time with the families, they're still getting phone calls from like people they're trying to interview. It's just like, it's a job you can't switch off from, and they showed that really well. And yeah, it just, I really like that aspect of showing the world of a journalist and a reporter, like of what they go through to try and chase that story and chase the important hook, I guess. It's really good.
Yeah, there's that like when Meghan was apologising to the, I really wouldn't understand the legal person who she was going to, and she was apologising. Yes, it is a weekend, because her tone was a bit like, I just need to get what I want and I forget about the other person there. And I think that was an interesting, just like it's those little small realistic touches that did actually excel the film. And I think it links as well with women and work, because the amount of times it almost got, I don't think they overdid it, but it was quite repetitive, the amount of times they showed like the babies, the dad, everyone. But that was the point, I think that was the whole point of the film, was it was more about Me Too, it was about women in the workplace, and it was saying, if you can't, it's for sacrifices, but also those women there, they were definitely married to their husbands, but also married to their job, and it didn't say it was a wrong thing for them to be career oriented at all. It just kind of said, here's the reality of it,
Like to me, like it shows how hard it must be to try and maintain that like family life, like the husband or wife, whatever, and the baby, and like you're trying to juggle like the full-time job, like they're really like chasing these stories. It's like I don't know how they do that. Like it's really like hard work to do, and it's just like the commitment levels, and it's just impressive, and really well done.
Yeah. One bit of the film that I wasn't quite sure on about their journalism was, it was the scene where Jodie had gone all the way to Silicon Valley, I believe, to interview the Rowena Chung, and instead it was her husband there. And then she did end up kind of having a very awkward conversation with him on his front porch. And I think in general it was kind of a theme of the film was like meeting people in person.
Yeah.
And that was did you agree like that was the right thing for Jodie to do? Because what she did say was kind of destroying the privacy of Jodie, because I think ultimately she kind of did hint too much at it being a sexual kind of misdemeanor that was involved with her time at Miramax.
Yeah, I feel like she obviously did the right thing, obviously first and foremost trying to go meet them face to face, because especially with a story as serious as this, like I feel like that was the best approach, because sometimes it's not something you could discuss on a phone call, and people will be thinking like, could anyone like tap into this? Can anyone hear the call? Like, I think it's always best to do face to face. But I feel like the way they worded it to the partner wasn't the strongest. Like, they inferred too much what it was about and what had happened at Miramax. So I feel like they could have maybe worded that, like, I don't know, maybe kept it more not secretive, but kept it between her and obviously the employee, rather than involving the partner that much, because then they were asking follow-up questions and then they were just being closed off and they couldn't obviously tell him, but they inferred too much to the point where it would have become an issue potentially.
Yeah, as well as the ethical point of view, it's like the pragmatic, it was losing her chance of getting that story because then the husband would speak to Rowena and then it was all that. And also it was just very odd because for a film about feminism, it was very much, you don't know that if the husband can speak for the wife and can take, you know, like parental kind of responsibility. It was almost like he was her parent at that bit. It was interesting, but at the end of the film, in the credits, it did say it's based on a book. So I think maybe in the book it probably explained that better. And if anything, this film 100% made me want to read the book. Yeah. And I think I probably actually might even enjoy it more as a book if it had more detail on like the point of view from the journalist. It would just be quite a boring film if they were like, oh, 10-minute conversation about whether I should have done that. Yeah.
No, like going back to the point about whether Jodie should have gone out to speak to her husband. I think like ethically that's probably like one of the few things in the film that they did kind of wrong, or Jodie did kind of wrong, just going out there and just mentioning. Like, there was a point where I guess she knew she said too much to her husband. I was like, can you, like, just stop doing too much. And then that was like one of the. Like, I'm sure they made many mistakes, but it's like it almost shows that they are human. They make mistakes as journalists, and but it was unfortunate, I guess.
Yeah, I think one of the things I didn't like about the film was the New York Times kind of building. At times, it felt like an advert for the New York Times. Just how glossy everything looked and how amazing and progressive their workplace was. And I was shocked actually that there was no anyone ever having a comment on what about us as journalists, have we ever had in the industry a Me Too moment, especially like with their older mentor character. What, you know, did she say anything about the culture of the New York Times changing, which is like a liberal bastion for the world, but it's like with the BBC and all those other organisations, just due to their huge past and the amount of people that have worked there, they have so many skeletons in the closet, and we all know lots of very, very famous cases in Britain. So it was just, I just found it a bit odd that it almost became into PR territory at certain bits with kind of, it's because they're all real people still involved. Yeah. It only happened 2017, this story, so they're not going to offend anyone in the story, but I think they kind of should have.
Yeah, I mean, I feel going back to like what you said about just like the advertisement type of thing, I get that they had to like change the setting to make, you know, they're back in the newsroom, but sometimes I think when they just flashed to like the same wide shot of the logo, I was a bit like, okay, we get it, like we get where you work there, yeah.
It is a really good film, but I think it was just certain bits like that was clunky. Another bit was Gwyneth Paltrow. They were like, Gwyneth Paltrow, and that probably did happen in real life, but I kind of came after when there was that scene as well saying, oh, Lena Dunham was on to us trying to help us, everyone was on to us. I don't know why, it's just something annoyed me with the way the script was written then, and maybe it went in a book, that I just felt like, are these celebrities
I don't know.
Not they're getting paid, but they're getting good publicity from this?
I don't know. I think the point they sort of made towards the start, or when they were starting to investigate it was that they're going after high-profile celebrities who may have been abused or something. But is it the editor? She sort of said, no, let's go after like assistants. Or
yes.
So I think they were trying to. The reporters were like trying to go for the high-profile names to try and make the story, which they kind of do with Ashley Judd when the story does come out. But I think the editors, they kind of make the point, no, this happened to like everyone. It's like the assistants, like the PR people, this happened to everyone. So I think that might have been a tactic by the journalists themselves at the time to try and just only talk to high-profile people. Like then they were trying to talk to as many as possible. But yeah, that shift in the second half of the film where they tried to target just anyone who worked there or connected to Harvey Weinstein was like really good shift in focus.
Yeah, I think linked to that, it's the ethical thing here is with Ashley Judd, she played herself in this film. Yeah. And I was thinking, is that the correct way to make a film? Because it's like blurring the lines between fiction and documentary when you start having actresses, people who can act, not like wooden people. Like it'd be far different if it was someone who can't act and was a cameo. But her cameos, especially the bit at the end, and I'm sure it is true, you know, that she was running and then she not changes her mind, but finally makes a position. Yeah. But to me, it just felt PR.
I can see that, but I don't know. I want to know if the people, like the celebrities, how much contact there would have been between the filmmakers and the actor, the famous actors who, like, was that contact made to try and include them in the film, or like were they happy to be included? Do they insist on being included? Because we heard at the start, like a lot of famous people, they didn't want to be included in the report.
Yes.
So did they change their minds? Did they want to? I don't know. Like, I guess we'll never know. Like, about how those choices were made. But it's a key point, I guess.
And there's this other scene just towards the very end of the film where they had that first kind of mention properly of like the casting couch and that old idea of Hollywood by someone else, and it was kind of a good way to kind of, I think they did that very well, because it kind of showed, instead of with audio and radio, it showed visually with a face-to-face scene that the public and other media outlets' reaction to this story is very much going to be, oh yeah, but did it help her career? Oh yeah, this is just normal. This is a casting couch. Oh yeah, women have all the things that were said in real life, and I think they did that quite effectively. That like slice it in. So I think with all this, do you think that the ending, mentioning the ending there, do you think that the ending where it's just them proofreading kind of the story, and then you kind of saw on the screen the names of all the people, as you were saying, Stephen, it's kind of the names are crucial to the story. Do you think that was an anticlimactic or good ending?
I feel like it was realistic, if anything. Like, obviously, like, they've put their all into this story, but at the end of the day, it will just be them having to proofread it all and click submit. But, like, I feel like as they, like, sort of filmed around it, like, showing it been printed and been published, and then, like, having, like, the flashbacks to the younger selves of the actresses, I thought that was really tastefully done. But obviously, at the end of the day, it will just be them, like, you know, gathered around a computer. But I feel like in a way it was quite nice, because they'd all in turn had some part in making this story what it was. So it was like sort of good to have them all there at the end.
Yes. Yeah, and I think it's good to show the teamwork of the newsroom. And I think that's maybe a slight criticism of the film was Andre Braugher, who played like one of the senior figures there, who was on the phone with Harvey Weinstein quite a lot, and then their older mentor. I felt like we could have just seen a bit more of them kind of helping collaboratively with the story. It was very much Megan and Jodie, and I did read online that in the book, other members of the colleagues of the New York Times have bigger roles in the book. So I liked the teamwork aspect of the ending too, because it was like everyone's seeing if there's like a mistake, and it was showing the experience and skill you gain of writing that really just comes with age, you know. Yeah,
like just even the one just been like, hang on, and then he just had to finish proofreading. I thought that was a nice little touch in as well. Like,
I do think it might be more geared towards journalists that ending, who like the ending.
Yeah.
Because I think members of the public could be like, oh God. Yeah, and I think I was thinking the same thing. I liked the ending in a way because it's realistic, but is it for more journalists only?
I didn't like the whole. It felt like they were trying to make a happy ending, I guess. Yeah. And it's like, oh, sexism solved now, misogyny solved now. And it's like, no, they could have done the whole spotlight ending where they showed, oh, this is only just the start of this in terms of the abuse, but we'll get onto that later on, I guess. They kind of Disney did it a bit at the ending. They kind of made, oh, this is a happy ending now. But I don't know. They could have gone either way with it, but I would have liked it if they made it more realistic and made it and just shown, look, this is only just the beginning. Like, I'm shown what happened post like Harvey Weinstein, the whole Me Too movement. I wish they would have gone into that in more detail, like maybe just like 5-10 minutes at the end, instead of making it like rainbows and flowers.
Yeah, I wouldn't have minded seeing the real Jodie and Megan at the end, because I do like it in historical films.
Even just
where
like
you
a
see
picture,
the picture of
yeah.
them at the end, because especially if they had gone to any kind of awards ceremony celebration, or because it did seem like Megan's character was so interesting, but her depression and her just kind of apathy, understandable, because that's the way the world is. It's more like realism than cynicism. But it would have been nice kind of just to see at least them getting recognition.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think, as a journalist.
Yeah, just like a minute at the end of I don't know, I don't know how they do it, even if it's just their pictures or something like that. Yeah, it would have been really good to have included, because it would have put like their faces to the names again.
Interestingly, I felt like the story Jodie and I think this is the thing about it being on real life, it's you can't have like these perfect narrative arcs and journeys, because I think Jodie's character, because of all the travelling she did, and because of her younger age, I assumed that. Yeah, she did look younger, because they had a joke about her being shorter as well. But it seemed like she had this catharsis, and she just grew, and she had those scenes with her daughter, and that I actually wrote this down. That was jaw-dropping, that scene. I think it was so well acted when the daughter was saying about rape.
Yeah.
And then it's like, how do you explain to your child, to a girl as well, what rape is?
It also like showed the culture in today's society, like schools, I guess, like how rape is like kind of how the word itself has been desensitized in schools and stuff, like, and how kids will sort of throw it around as like it doesn't mean anything. And it was really an interesting way of introducing it in, like, and just sort of bringing it into, bring it in, I guess. Like, it was an intriguing scene to do.
Yeah, the tastefulness. It is so tasteful. I just think sometimes a film could have just gone a bit more into emotion and sentimental, because the scenes where it was like jaw-dropping when you were hearing, another one was about the sofa, and the advice to his assistant was make sure to stay in a chair and never to go on a sofa. And that was in London as well. And I found it interesting that it was worldwide, and I didn't really know that the Me Too with Harvey Weinstein in particular was in Hong Kong and London and other countries. And my knowledge of it was, I think, just because I was 16 at the time, it was a huge news story, but it wasn't something very much like I followed, but it did change the world, this particular piece of journalism.
Yeah.
Maybe more so, sadly, in a way than Spotlight did, because I feel that since 2017, since the Me Too, whether you like it or not, or whatever your opinion is, the world has shifted, I think, to being more sensitive and more liberal in other things, and there's positives and negatives with that, lots of people would argue. So I do think it definitely changed the world, this journalism.
Yeah. I think even like, because at the start of the story, before they even like purely based it on Hollywood, they were looking at all different types of organisations, and she'd like discussed that she'd already like looked into 2 and found stuff out. So like it was like just sort of interesting to see how like, yes, this like piece in particular was based on Hollywood, but then it sort of already alluded to the fact that it was having like a domino effect into other workplaces, and like forcing them to look at their structure and look at how they're, you know, what's in place and support for all their staff, because they'd like, it started with other organisations, but then this was the one that like caught everyone's attention and like got the media attention and got people to start thinking, well, what about my workplace? Like, have they got like plans in place? Or like, are they looking after me properly? Yeah.
Yeah, no, and they kept saying like systemic, and this was again like Spotlight. It's that thing of wait on the story, wait until you get as much evidence as possible, so it helps for most people, not just one hit wonder. You know, you just have to get the whole album out, and that is what helps people more with the different. And that's why they at first they're doing employees as well as just the actresses, to see it more systemic as an issue to help others. But I guess that's probably my final point is, do you think that it's so interesting when they spoke about the media in the film, and they were saying, well, it was stories, Harvey paid for stories, you know, with actresses and access to outlets, so they'd bury the story. And then when the New York Times is doing the story, Variety and then Vanity Fair, I believe, they were the ones that were kind of being manipulated and used by other parties with huge amounts of money behind these people's backs. I mean, just one Miramax film can gross like $400-500 million. So they have so much money there. So it kind of did feel like at points the villain of the film is actually the media too, as well as the abusers. And that was the same with Spotlight. There's two cover-ups. Yeah.
I guess like there's a reason why Harvey Weinstein got away with so long. Like, there's a reason why. So, everyone knew, like in the industry, like that of how much of a scumbag he was. Like everyone knew, but it was just because of how much control he had on like everyone. That's why he got away with it, and the way he was able to like squash the story, like whenever it would sort of rear its head, he was able to do that so like effectively. The role of the media, I guess, I don't know. The one thing I kind of find a bit weird is how protective they are of the story, like not just with like outside media, but also with like other newspapers. Like surely that's like a story they'd want every newspaper to report on, and not just kind of hide it from themselves. I guess it's like they kind of trust themselves to do it and to do it well, but surely they'd want every piece of media to cover it as much as possible, and not just one themselves.
Yeah.
Like that kind of shows like the competitive nature of like newspapers and print media, and just how weird it is, and just how it's important for themselves to cover it and not and to get there first. I guess it's really weird. I guess.
And this whole film is based on the book by Jodie and Megan, from their point of view, from the New York Times point of view. It doesn't really, you never see Ronan Farrow. I have a conversation with him in the New Yorker, and arguably I'd say in Britain, interestingly, he has more name recognition with the Me Too story. So in a way, this film is justified to kind of raising the profiles of these women journalists as well, who put in so much work. But so did Ronan Farrow, from everything I've read about that story, about the New Yorker's investigation. And to me, it was a point they couldn't make because of that origin. They couldn't be hypocritical, because then it's like the whole film falls apart, because it is very much, the end it is, look at this small team whose work has changed the world, instead of all the activists, all the people who were speaking up in the Venice Film Festival, who were speaking up years earlier. You know, that's not the ending. No. The ending is this is the heroes.